Hey guys, my name is Mike, and I've been studying Russian for the last 5 or 6 years. My native language is English, and I live in the United States. So I wanted to start this first video, which is primarily geared towards relative beginners, A1, even up to A2 maybe, but primarily relative beginners in Russian. And this has to do with some basic linguistic structures that are different in Russian versus in English. So, as the title of my video says, Russian speakers are lazy. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard somebody whose native language is Russian say, "Oh, yeah, we Russians are lazy." And I'm like, "Oh, really?" Because until I started learning Russian, I never had such hard words as удовлетворение or уведомление or достопримечательности. It's like you feel every now and then like you have to say supercalifragilisticexpialidocious in Russian just to get by. And so I couldn't believe that so many people say, well, Russians are lazy. Well, first, let me just say that I think that every language is lazy in a sense, in that people are trying to just express whatever they want to say in the simplest terms possible. And even though Russian is loaded down with all these really long words, there's a lot in Russian speech that is actually left out. I've got some notes here, kind of an outline, but one of the things that occurs to me now that I hadn't thought of previously is this idea that, like, I'm talking about something. You don't necessarily have to say "Я говорю об этом," like I'm talking about this. You just say "Я об этом," like I am about this, or "Я не про это." I'm not about that, which essentially means I'm not talking about that. But you can very easily just leave off the word I'm speaking, I'm talking. Just say "Я об этом," which means I'm talking about this. So that's one example. Um, and and this is one example of verbs that can be commonly understood by Russians to be there, even though you're leaving them off. They understand that what you mean is that you're talking about this, and not necessarily that you're actually saying I am about this. Okay, so that's the first example. Here's another one that occurred to me in my early years studying Russian, and that is that Russians often leave out direct objects at the end of a sentence, or often the subject of a sentence. So, for example, let's use the word pодарок, a gift. I want a gift. Я хочу подарок. So if someone would ask me, for example, do you want a gift? Ты хочешь подарок? I could answer by saying, да, я хочу подарок. But it's completely unnecessary to say all of that. I could say, да, я хочу, and just completely leave off the word подарок. Or I could just say, да, хочу, because хочу actually contains the information that it's me who wants something, and because this person asked me about a подарок, a gift, then I don't have to repeat that word. And the other thing I would say is that I could also say "Я хочу это," which means, yes, I want this. But it's not very common that you're going to find the word "это" at the end of a Russian sentence. It sometimes does happen, but more often than not, Russians just leave it off altogether. And so I would say the most natural response to "Ты хочешь подарок" would be "Да, хочу," leaving off the subject and the direct object completely. So the laziness that I'm talking about, and that you should accustom yourself to when you're speaking or learning Russian, is leave off as much information as you can, which sounds counterintuitive, but that's the way that Russian works. You want to look at the way that a verb is conjugated. You want to look at, say, the gender of how a verb is being used. So here's an example of that. Someone might ask in Russian, did you receive my gift? Вы получили мой подарок? Or подарок от меня? Did you receive a gift from me? And I would just say, да, получил. So, получил, well, I know that I'm speaking about me because they asked me, and I don't have to say padarik again because they know exactly what is being talked about. Or, here's another example. Let's say that I'm talking with a female person, and obviously I'm male, so there's a male and a female talking, and then I just say, oh, out of the blue, without a question, by the way, I received the gift from you. So I could say, кстати, получил подарок от тебя. Which, so the verb получил actually contains my gender. And so we know from the context that it can't be her that I'm talking about. Otherwise, I would have said получила, because that's the actual gender of the verb. So in that context, when there's a female and a male speaking, if I say получил and I'm talking about one of the two of us, I'm obviously talking about me. So I can just drop off the subject altogether. So this is another thing, an example I've given elsewhere. But so for example, someone might say, "Ты любишь блины?" Do you like pancakes? Do you love pancakes rather? And I would just say, "Да, люблю." You could say, "Да, я люблю блины," but it's completely unnecessary. So if you want to sound more Russian, like Russians speak, just say "Да, люблю." And the other thing is that if you are going to use a direct object, then you have to put it into the accusative case, and you have to select the right gender and the right plurality. So if I want to use a direct object with pancakes, I would have to say "Да, люблю их." Yes, I love them, because we're talking about something in the plural. If I want to say I loved your gift, "Да, я люблю его." I could say "это," which just means this, but if I want to specifically refer to the word padarik but use a pronoun, then I would say "Да, люблю его." I can't say "Да, люблю он," because that's not in the accusative case. So the best thing, in my opinion, rather than trying to figure out, okay, what gender is it? What's the accusative case? Is it singular or is it plural? Is when it's understood what you're talking about, just leave it off. And that will simplify things altogether. The other thing is, again, Russians don't use "это" very often at the end of a sentence. Like I said before, it does happen. But if you're going to use a direct object, you typically use его for something that's masculine or neuter, or you'll use ее, like for книга. Yes, I read the book. Да, я прочитал ее. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a guide. One other note when it comes to these words "это" and "то," or this and that, is in English speech, we typically default to the word "that." Like, someone asks, would you like to have a conversation about this topic? And I would respond by saying, yes, I'd like to talk about that. In Russian, we would say, "Да, я хочу говорить с тобой об этом." So they default to the word "this," whereas in English, we default to using the word "that." So please remember that. That's very important that you use the word when you're considering an object that's under both of your considerations in a conversation, for example, that you think about the word this. And so you always default to eta. So if I wanted to say, "Ya lublu eta," which, as I said, doesn't happen that often, um, that's "I love this." Like, say, this gift, for example. But I would never say, "Ya lublu to." At least I've never heard that. To, or that, is normally a connective word to some other words in Russian. And it's not used like in English, like, hey, yeah, I'd like to talk about that, or I love that, etc. Whenever we say that in English, as say in the accusative case or a direct object, for example, in Russian, we default to the word this, это, whereas in English, it's that. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But again, you want to get accustomed to thinking about leaving out as much information as you possibly can. Okay, so a couple of other things. Russians don't have the word to be generally in the present tense. Now, strictly, it does exist and it can be used. There's будет or there's является. So a couple different ways to express it, but 95% of the time or better, it's not used at all in the present tense. But it is used in past tense and often in future tense, but it doesn't have to be. So sometimes verbs are constructed in a way where you don't need to use the word будет. But in some cases you do need to use it. So that's one other item that's actually just completely, well, for the most part, left out of the Russian language, so you don't typically have to deal with it. If I just want to say, I'm a director, я руководитель, I wouldn't say I am or anything like that. And that's why when you hear Russians who are not necessarily speaking correct English say things like, I director, and they'll just leave out the word am because they're not used to the verb to be in the present tense. But of course, it does exist in the past tense and also in the future tense, but it's not always needed, not always required. Also, like I said, no articles, a, and, the. They just don't exist in Russian at all. So that's one other thing that they've dispensed with, maybe even for economy and efficiency in speech. Excuse me. So how do they deal with that? I mean, in English, we basically think that articles are necessary. And we do convey information, but how do Russians deal with that? Well, you'll find that maybe 80% of the time, an article is just not necessary. We give information in English where it doesn't necessarily need to be there. But if it needs to be there in Russian, then they'll add other words. So, for example, if you're talking about a person, you can say, instead of just человек, a person, you can say один человек. Or if you want to talk about this person or the person that you're talking about, then you can say этот человек, this person. So there is no the, but basically you can replace that concept with the word этот человек. Okay, finally this concept of li and how you would use that. So there's essentially a couple of cases in which you would use that, and that's the one thing that Russian teachers don't normally tell their students is what you can equate this to in English speech. And it gradually dawned on me that li is half of the word ili. And I don't think that's by accident. I don't know the etymology of the word exactly. But the way that I think about it is that it does mean Или means or, and it contains this meaning of or not. So in English, when you would say whether or not, like, I don't know whether or not we're going. Я не знаю, будем ли мы ехать туда. I don't know whether or not we're going there. So Russians can accomplish this whole idea of whether or not in one simple small word, li. And so wherever in English you would say whether, or you would say whether or not, use the word li. And it always goes after the verb. And so you'll typically see the verb, like, let's say, are we going to the store or not in English? Будем ли мы ехать в магазин? You could also say, мы будем ехать в магазин? Are we going to the store? But if there's this idea of, well, maybe we aren't, and you really want to know, yes or no, are we going to the store? Then you can add this li. Будем ли мы ехать в магазин? So the way that my Russian teacher explained this to me was that you use li whenever there's some doubt about the answer. And I think that's partially accurate. So you can use it in just regular questions, like, are you going to join me this evening? Будешь ли ты присоединиться ко мне, or something like that, вечером. And that doesn't necessarily in English translate to whether or not, but it does retain this idea of, so I would say a good translation might be, are you going to join me this evening or not? Or are you going to join me this evening? Yes or no? So I believe this word li really encapsulates the concept of yes or no. Is it going to happen, or is it this way? So hopefully I've been able to take several concepts in the basic learning of Russian from an English point of view in this video, and at least give you a good start and a flavor of the kinds of ideas that I have, and hopefully you'll find this video and others that I produce in the future useful. Thanks for listening.